This is your host Robert Klein from The Art of Fighting, and we're back with Antonio Graceffo, the author of The Monk from Brooklyn, the host and creator of Martial Arts Odyssey, and a noted expert on Southeast Asian martial arts. He's also a frequent co-host on the show.
And I was a definite individual from very young. You know, my grandmother taught me. My grandmother had a master's degree in foreign languages and a master's degree in education. She had 2 master's degrees. I mean, given the generation that she came from, that is just an impossibility. And I grew up, like I said, speaking Spanish and Italian. She taught me French. She taught me German. You know, one of the best gifts I remember I was preschool when I got my first encyclopedia set. So I think that when I left my grandmother's house and went to school, living with my dad, where 1, we were forbidden to speak Italian. You know, he'd smack us if we spoke Italian. 2, there was nobody who told me that that was normal, the things that I wanted to do, reading and theater and, you know, whatever it was. There's nobody telling me that that was normal. My dad was really, really, really tough when he was young. He was tough then. The neighborhood where his mother was living turned over and became really a bad neighborhood, just a horrible bad neighborhood. And the only Italian people left were the few very old ladies, and they were getting victimized. And there was this kid that lived in the building, and the way he made his living was by robbing everyone who lived in the building. That was his thing. It's like, I'm the boss of the building. And my dad, we went there to visit my grandma, and he just caught a glimpse of this kid in the hallway, and he grabbed him and he shoved him in the apartment, and he locked the door and beat the living shit out of him. And then he said to him, "You're responsible for my mother now. Anybody hurts my mother, I'm going to kill you." Kind of got it at home, you know, "Oh, you're not tough enough, you're not tough, you're not tough." And then I'd go to school and I'd get beat up all the time. And the one thing I wouldn't do, though, I wouldn't back down. These guys would be like, "If you say that again, I'm going to kick your ass." And I'd say, "Okay, I'll say it again." Because I wasn't going to change my behavior. I figured, well, you're going to beat me up anyway. So they were anyway. But I realized that very young. I realized whether you conform or you don't conform, you're going to get beat up. So you might as well just be you. Might as well live the way you want to live and just take the consequences.
So what was kind of the low point? You've been dealing with depression, you had this abusive father, you weren't doing well in school.
Well, just in defense of my father, let's not call him abusive.
Okay,
let's say we didn't get along.
You had difficulties.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, seriously, man, I mean, to blame my dad for my hard childhood or to even say that I had a child. Look, there's people that are suffering, so I mean, I don't want to say that I had a hard time. But it was what it was. You know, my family moved to Tennessee when I was 9. That was horrible, man. I was Catholic, Italian, New York, everything they didn't like, everything. And I just got beat up all the time. They used to call me, "You New York Jew," and they'd beat the crap out of me. "You damn Pope worshiping Jew. You killed Christ." From the minute I got on the bus, I was getting beat up. All the way to school, there'd be guys like spitting on me and hitting me all the way to school every day. Get on the bus and I'd see a couple of people that were a little bit my friend. "Hey, how you doing, Tim? How you doing?" "Oh yeah, I was at the thing." "Oh, do you watch Battlestar Galactica last night?" And there'd be guys beating me up all the way to school. So there were these like 2 or 3 black kids. They were super nice to me, and I was like, you know, like, okay, well, I made some friends. And then that was a problem. And then one day I went to school and those black kids weren't there anymore. And I said, "What happened?" "Oh, well, we sent them to a different school where they might feel more comfortable." I'm like, "Why, they have padded chairs?" Maid service, but comfortable. I'd stop doing my homework, so they tear it up. And then every day I didn't have my homework. You know, they'd steal my lunch. So I stopped eating lunch. It went on for years. There was one other Italian family that lived there. They were also from New York. And they were named Delgardo. And Mr. Delgardo had his son got beat up all the time. And so Mr. Delgardo goes to my dad, and they were good friends. And he says to my dad, he goes, "Listen, I sent my son Chris to go learn martial arts. Why don't you send, you know, Antonio?" And they called me Scott when I was young. And sent Scott with him. And so that's how I got into martial arts. And place called the American School of Empty Hand Fighting, and the guy was a returning Vietnam War veteran who at the time was like really screwed up by the war. He was a great guy though, and he did a lot for us. And he taught us boxing, kickboxing, and he called it American Kung Fu, but I mean, it was really boxing and kickboxing, and that's how I got started in martial arts. First of all, I sucked at martial arts, just as bad as I did in any other sport. I was really bad. And in fact, some of the bullies that were picking on me, it turned out that they were like high ranks at this school, and they would beat me more because they didn't want me there. And I stuck it out. And I just remember I had no natural ability, no talent, and I just stuck it out and stuck it out. And after a year, 2 years, Probably about two, almost 3 years. In the third year, I started getting good. And then I could fight pretty well. And still, though, there's the rule, you're not supposed to fight, so I didn't. And then I used to wear that as a badge of pride. I would get beat up. I would stand up to these guys because I wouldn't back down. I'd still let them beat me up. But I would just smile and I'd say, I know I can kill you, but I'm not going to. And that was a weird source of pride for me at that time in my life. Eventually, every tough guy would turn up at the gym at some point, and I'd fight him in the ring. Every one of those guys turned up there at some point, and they get in the ring and suddenly look at, I mean, they fight like women. They don't know how to fight. I mean, they're not trained. And who are they fighting? They're fighting they're bullies. So they're fighting smaller people who can't defend them in school where people are afraid to hit back or something. Now suddenly he's in a boxing ring. When I saw a tough guy reduced to tears, behaving like a woman, turning his face, like turning, the most common one is turning their head and like running away. And I really felt bad for them. And when I went through boot camp years later when I was in the Army and I went through boot camp and I saw guys reduced to just collapse and start crying and I suddenly realized how low a human being can sink. When a human being is absolutely shattered, how low they can go. And that every single person has their breaking point and every person can reach that level. When a human being drops to that level that they're like just completely broken, they're crying, they're not even human anymore. And hopefully if you're a good person, it means you feel compassion for someone that sinks to that level. But I think that it would be very easy for someone to just not regard them as a human being anymore at that point. You know, I've lived and worked in Cambodia, and I mean, I know people. I mean, I had one of my students in Cambodia, an adult student, who wrote an essay about the Khmer Rouge period, and he said there were even children who turned in their parents, and then the parents were killed. And then he started crying. He collapsed and started crying, and I realized what he was saying was...
He was one of those children.
But I understood, and I completely forgave him. I don't think he couldn't forgive himself, but I forgave him. I understood where he was at that point. When you reach complete collapse and you're no longer human. The war in Burma, you know, I mean, what I've seen over there, just people that have just, when you have had everything taken away from you, and when you're completely physically naked and injured, and you know, this guy I know, he stepped on a landmine. He was forced. Burmese soldiers, you know, took him out of his village and put him at gunpoint and used him as a human mine detector. Forced him into the landmine, and he stepped on a landmine and it blew up, and they left him there. And he lay there for something like 3 days or 8 days until somebody found him. The rebels found him and took him to the base, and that's how I met him. And I think that was part of it when I was fighting a lot and when I was kind of living on the streets and when I was kind of doing a lot of things like that. I think that maybe I was trying to hit that rock bottom and I just never made it. And I think I secretly always believed that if you don't hit rock bottom, you can never
rebuild.
Yeah. You're building on a faulty foundation.
So you're still trying to do that, aren't you?
I don't think so. It kind of bothers me in myself. I don't see myself trying to hit rock bottom anymore. If I do now, I mean, it's got purpose. You know, I worked on an ambulance crew in the Philippines in a pretty bad neighborhood. So I mean, you could say, yeah, I mean, I was risking my life, but I was there to help people, and I was there to write a book. You know, so it's different.
I'm your host, Robert Klein, and this is The Art of Fighting.